Got kids? Or maybe grandkids? High schoolers, perhaps, where the family's saving for college is considerably behind schedule? Today, the RLS boys offer insight into how you can help such students find the college or non-college path that truly will help them thrive as adults. We'll also discuss how they can boost their chances if they choose the college path of getting the funds they'll need to avoid leaving them or their families buried under a giant mound of student debt. Stay tuned as we explore all this and more right now on the Retirement Lifestyle Show.
Welcome to the Retirement Lifestyle Show. I'm your co-host, Roshan Loungani, here with Adrian Nicholson and Erik Olson. We've got another great episode for you today, great topic that, Erik, you are the one who brought this to us with the situation with the client. Do you mind starting us off?
Oh, not at all. So obviously college, giant expense for many families. And sometimes as an advisor, we have these conversations with clients and you see there's a lot of forces that are at work, a lot of family dynamics that can be at work in some of these struggles with families trying to sort through the question of how do they provide the option at least of a college education to each of their children, if that's a good fit, and then how do they cover the cost of that? Sometimes it's just not immediately evident how that's going to happen because, while it's certainly the case that in some families there's an abundant surplus of income or wealth that can take care of that cost, in other cases it really takes some careful planning and maneuvering. That's particularly true if that's waited until later in life. One of my clients, as I kind of went through this journey with them, I could see that they were, I think, in many ways, a little bit guilt-driven in their approach to how they were going to pay for college. Here's why. I think they felt like they had not provided for their children in quite the same way in their earlier years that other of their peer families had done, or at least the children's friends had done. And so they felt at this level as though the way that they could sort of resolve or make up this shortfall, perhaps in some of the ways they provided for their kids, was to give them a carte blanche on whatever school they wanted to go to with, cost be damned, we'll figure out how to do it. Now, you're 16, 17, and 18, and you're making these decisions. And now listeners, think about when you were 16, 17, and 18 and the sorts of the reasoning process that you would follow. As you might imagine, in the case of this family's children, it was very much, well, this is where my friends are going, or I love the campus, and on, really driven by things that have no bearing whatsoever on the ultimate ability of that child to be prepared for a career and a workplace and develop a set of values and what have you. And as it happened, at least one of the children picked possibly one of the most expensive choices that she could in this Midwest area. And as a result, the parents felt like, you know what, we signed up for this, we're going to figure out how to do that. What it meant, though, was, despite my counsel, they essentially were signing up for a massive parent student loan obligation. And which meant that, coupled with some other dynamics in their household, including the premature disability of one of the two, after all of these obligations had been absorbed, or at least had been committed to, it made it enormously difficult for this family to proceed with the paying down of those student loans. So I felt like it's really useful to have a conversation with your child, and for us to have a conversation with you as listeners about approaching this in a sober and strategic way, so that on the one hand, you do provide, if that's something that you and your children value, a great education for your kids, but at the same time, not do so in a way that's going to break the bank. So on that basis, we said, why don't we address this with our listeners?
I think that's great. And I recently, it's been a few years now, I mentioned it on the podcast before, dealt with a similar conversation with my niece where she was just comparing a really expensive school to state school. And I have to applaud her maturity because I looked at what their average graduate made in income and found out the really expensive
Hmm.
school was pretty much the same as the lower cost state school. So I just
Hmm.
thought cost benefit wasn't there,
Hmm.
and she ended up going to the state school, which was I was not popular at home for having this conversation with her because the state school was about 3 hours away versus a school in DC 20 minutes away, and my father and sister wanted her to stay at home, like not live at home but stay close, so she'd still live on campus. But
Hmm.
it just made no sense. So I won that battle, but
Hmm.
I got a lot of complaints along the way.
It shows the value of just looking into it, just doing your research on these schools because you can find better options at a more reasonable price, which is really beneficial in the long run. Like that story you mentioned, Eric, where if this if you were going to move forward with this school, it would be very difficult financially for your future just to finance it and look at making cutbacks or whatever. It can be very difficult. But if you maybe do some research, look at all their options, and just have a conversation and keep stuff open, it might make for a better outcome, which is always really beneficial.
Absolutely. Stanford University actually published a paper in 2018, and I think this was actually an update to a paper that they had done. We'll put the link in the show notes so that you can find this paper. But it really confronted this question of how well or better prepared or not better prepared will your student be if they wind up going to an elite university or not. And in the bottom line of their paper was is that people grossly overestimate how much an advantage from a career standpoint a child will have by attending a super expensive elite school versus another school. In fact, in some cases, if your child really isn't well matched with other students in that school, going to a school that's too challenging for them, perhaps, or that's really they're not prepared for academically, might actually do more harm than good. Because yes, they'll have social connections, but they might wind up either demoralized, dropping out, or at the very least, looking at themselves in a different way as perhaps less successful than their peer group, simply because they surrounded themselves with the ultra elite peer group of of hyper performers. And so on that basis, they didn't come away with a sense of confidence and determination that they might otherwise have had. So we'll put that paper in the show notes, but it's sometimes it's, by the way, not the children's dream. It's the parents' dream for the children. And so it's living out that aspiration through the vicariously through their children that's a driver here. There too, I would say perhaps a better approach is really work through the question of what's motivating you as opposed to just plowing ahead and assuming that the only acceptable outcome is if your child winds up in one of the top 10 universities academically in the country. It's not necessarily going to be a win for your child or for
Yeah,
your
one of the
finances.
more common matches that I seen before, it could be different, but it was just a chart where you take a student's GPA score and you take their SAT score and you can match it up where if they got this type of SAT score and this type of GPA, these are the schools which would be a good fit for the scores that they had. That chart has definitely changed, and for different schools it could be changing all the time, but that's just one good indicator to see what school that far as the grades and test scores you got, you'd be a good match for. So that's something
Hmm.
too, a data point people
Hmm.
can look at to really just start narrowing down schools and seeing where it's a good fit.
Well, let's actually start move on to Eric. A very interesting conversation we had when preparing for this, which is should your child go to college at all,
Hmm.
right? And yeah, I know you've got some good data on that.
Well, here's what I think my thinking about this is as we all are well aware, college costs have risen at a considerably faster rate than inflation has done. I mean, general inflation has risen. And as a result, in terms of relative amount of savings that you would need to devote to this to, let's say, 30 or 40 years ago, it's a considerable commitment financially. On top of that, it is often the case now that students are not finishing in 4 years. In fact, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 5.5 years is the average, or the average duration by which roughly half of all students who enter have actually then completed their undergraduate degree. So with that, you're signing up for not just 4 years of expense, but running into 5.5, 6. And as a result, as you start doing just the cost benefit analysis on the outlays for all of that versus the what they'll receive in exchange for that delayed entry into employment at one level, that is indeed a consideration. Now, if your student, I think it's fair to say, if your student is planning to head into a career, which is a really highly compensated career, particularly for which there's a lot of rigorous preparation that's necessary, specifically, let's say, in areas of science, engineering, potentially mathematics and such, then one can understand how that would make sense. But if, let's say, your student is planning to go into, and this is a real example of other friends of mine, actually, they went into social work, and yet they took 7 years to get prepared to go into social work. They had an enormous student debt obligation after that, with no real way, given their salaries, to pay for that. So, you have to, I think, ask yourself, if I'm in this client's case or this friend's case specifically, I think a question might have been, is there another way that I can express my compassion for people professionally without necessarily having to mount 7 years of great expense in order to reach the point of arrival where I'm able to do that?
And even beyond the expense, and taking out the fact of learning, could you have started helping that community 7 years earlier? Yeah, talking about the
Hmm.
overall. Now, maybe the position you got, you can't get without that degree. Or yeah, I've got a friend that got
Hmm.
an advanced degree in social work, so maybe you wouldn't be qualified for the position. So that might not be a real comparison.
Hmm.
But just putting that out there, I'm not experienced enough or knowledgeable enough in that specific field to know if that's the case or not.
Hmm. Yeah, and by the way, this is not a knock on the gene inside you that wants to be compassionately engaged in social work. It's really just a statement about the relative, in just pure dollar terms, return via ongoing earnings power against the investment that you would make in this way.
Yeah, and it's you've got finance guys that live on math and numbers, and that's
Mhm.
exactly what we're talking about right now, right?
That is.
And yet that's I mentioned my niece earlier. That's the conversation I had with her, that um, the cost of 3 years of the state school was equivalent to the cost of 1 year of the uh, DC school,
Hmm.
right? So, and then the income when you graduate was the same.
Hmm.
So it just that was the simple math behind it in my mind. Kind of the same thing I think, Eric, you were going for, that I was mentioning with the social work type degree.
Hmm. Yeah, so I mean, I'm the one of the three of us who's actually had kids go through that journey, and so there may be points at which I just drop in some stories here, but I think it helps to have a framework for thinking about this early on, if possible, and therefore to lay the groundwork for the conversations with your children as they develop, so that they understand it isn't a carte blanche. There is multiple factors are going to be brought into this consideration, and therefore you want to explore widely and develop the capacity within that child to love a lot of possible different settings and see value in a lot of possible different settings, rather than to necessarily have their heart fixed on one and only one school, which may or may not be a good return on that investment.
Right. I've actually, Eric, you are the only one, but I have had this conversation with my son Dylan, who, when he was at 8, maybe 7 or 8, he's 10
Oh,
now, where
good
he
for
had said
you.
he wanted to go to study art school. I think I've mentioned this to you before, maybe
Hmm.
not recorded it, but he said he wanted to go to art school. I said, I'm not paying for that. Take a year off and go to Paris and make art instead of wasting all this money learning about it. And to the art enthusiasts out there, I apologize. Maybe you'll disagree with me, but once again, it's a finance guy that I just don't see the math working out that way. Go make art and sell it instead of going to study it was my statement. Let's see what happens in 8 years when he's going to college, or if he's
So
going to
true.
college as we're having
So
this
true.
conversation.
No, I do think there is a lot of value in having some sort of just at a different level. What you explained was, get out into the real world
Yes.
as an interim step between finishing high school and then entering college. You meet some people whose journeys have just been from kindergarten on. They made their way all the way through 12, 13 years of public school, then 4 years of undergrad, then X number of years in a graduate setting. They're now full-fledged adults and have really never ever spent a full 40-hour week after week in any sort of workplace, or so it is a kind of a very specialized and unfortunately narrowing approach to developing human beings, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, you bringing us right into the topic of work study programs too. That's something people should really look at and just consider when they're looking at the types of university or what universities they want to go to. It's a very valuable way to not only finance the university that you attend, but also just get some type of experience in the career field that you want to head to. Can be a really good way just to see if this is something that's you like, that you really enjoy, and also get some experience and maybe meet some people that have some experience or have went through the program as well, is very beneficial and can really help see the direction you're headed in. Is very valuable, where you might not be able to get that opportunity if you don't go to college. So that's something also that you can really help determine on what university is going to be a good fit if they offer certain programs that might help you through that process or journey.
Hmm. Absolutely. So, guys, we've talked about the basic question, should you go? But we also should talk about the specifics of cost. What does it actually cost to attend one of these places? What are thoughts of you have got about that? And how do you select a place?
Well, I mean, I would before we get into the cost, and Eric, you may be going down this path, but we had talked about narrowing down the schools in general, right? A target school, a reach school. That's where I would
Hmm.
typically look at the cost is what are those schools? Did you have a different path in mind?
No, actually, that's a great way of framing it. So, a lot of times people will say, well, this is the school I'd really like to get into. And so I'm going to apply to 5 of these and keep my fingers crossed and hope that one of the 5 comes through. Well, all right, that may work. You might actually have a student whose grades and GPA and other elements of their overall profile make them an attractive admission to that school. But it might also be that they're not, or if they are admitted, it's with zero um, financial aid package from that college. And this is particularly true, incidentally, of some of the schools that just basically know we've got plenty of people, more than enough people, willing to pay full sticker price to send their child here. So why would we need to offer financial aid in order to incentivize somebody to come here? We're packed to the gills with applicants, and so let's go that direction. I'll give you a little story. Vanderbilt University in Nashville area is as a highly sought after school. The gross cost of attendance at Vanderbilt is somewhere now in the 70,000. I think it's 73 or more $1,000 per year. Now, so you might say, okay, well, that's Eric, that's sticker price, but what's the actual cost of attendance for most people who actually go? Well, the interesting feature of their model is that it's in a really desirable location. They have so many people that are applying. The number of people that it's only 3.7% of incoming freshmen have a merit-based award. And so while there may be some need, that merit-based award averaged a little less than $19,000. So what you're saying is you take less than $20,000 off that gross sticker of in the mid 70s, you're still looking at a net cost on that basis of in the mid 50,000s for the net cost of attendance there before you start getting into potentially need-based help or other sorts of things like that. But wow, just we don't need to provide you with merit-based aid, even if we could, even if you were deserving. So, why should we? This is, by the way, not a knock on Vanderbilt. It's just an observation of using that as an example about how these schools, depending on the demand, may not really have a need to provide
And
any help. So how do you?
let's compare
Yeah,
that
go
to
ahead.
a state school, and I'll just put a name out there and a number. I looked up the most expensive university in the world. Either of you have a guess as to what that is?
I know it's somewhere in California. I think you mentioned it the other day.
You are right. Yes, you are right about that. It is in California. It's Harvey Mudd College in California. It's right under
Oh,
80,000 a
mm-hmm,
year. Um, whereas,
mm-hmm,
and this is only tuition, so room and board would be higher. So I'm just going to estimate that, but the average state university is around uh, everything included. I'd say about a third of that, so more like 25 or so a year, or a little less for tuition, room, and board. So it is a huge difference in price when you're comparing the two.
mm-hmm. So here's a framework for maybe structuring your search, parents and listeners, and for that matter, students. So develop separate lists for those reach goals that if you could get in and you could get a nice award, that would be your dream. But understand that given you're not the only one who sees that as a really attractive option, and as it happens, for those reach goals, it's something like only 5% of the people that apply will be admitted. So just understand that. Then have another group of schools where it's your target school, where your student's profile matches that middle 50% of all the students that are there. So they're broadly speaking a good fit for that school's makeup and their student makeup. But it probably also helps to have a third list. And that third list would be a safety school. And the safety school would be one where your student's profile would fall into the top quarter of all the students, at least not only academically, but also given other aspects of their profile, their involvements, their leadership experiences, and demonstrated leadership, and so forth. That the reason for having that third category is not because it's necessarily the preferred place for your student to go, but the aid package, most merit-based aid packages are concentrated on the students that fall in that top 25% of the admitted incoming freshmen. So on that basis, your student in those settings has a better shot at some material help on the merit pay side than would be true at those other settings.
Yeah, that is definitely good advice to have the list of schools. Another thing worth noting for those of us that went to college a really long time ago, when you're applying for schools now, a lot of
Mm-hmm,
times schools will have a standard application. So if you pay the application fee for the
mm-hmm,
school, there isn't necessarily additional work required for the student to apply besides just paying the fee
mm-hmm,
and clicking.
mm-hmm,
So it makes it a lot
mm-hmm,
easier. I remember when I was applying, each school was different. It was a different packet for every school. So, like going back to my niece's story just a few years ago, I think she applied to like 20 schools just because it was so easy to click. And I
mm-hmm,
remember when I first heard that, I
mm-hmm.
thought, how do you have the time to fill out that many applications? Well, you don't have to anymore. Fill out one and it goes to all of them.
And even if let's say that's a $50 or $100
Yeah.
click every time, because that's they charge that. Think about that in your niece's case. Let's say it was $75 on average for 20 of those applications. You spent $1,500. Now that's not that's not nothing, but in comparison to a cost of education that might be in the several hundreds of thousands of dollars, to find the one where you could get a dramatically better offer and lower that net cost substantially, this that seems to me
Would
fifteen
be,
hundred
yeah.
dollars
Yeah.
extremely well
Yeah.
spent.
And I was
So
going to
if
say,
you
Eric, then you can
go
have
ahead.
a variety of those schools, the target, the reach, and the safety, and you can potentially. I don't think they'll necessarily quote unquote compete against one another, but you can kind of have them do that in the
Hmm.
sense that you can say, well, I'm getting this package from this school. Can you guys get me closer there if there's another one on there? I doubt it's something like where you'll really make a huge battle, but it's at least another point worth sharing with that financial aid office.
Oh, I fully believe in using the offers from one place as a point of conversation, we'll say, or possibly leverage with other schools, financial aid offers to say, hey, I'd love to attend, but here's the offer that we've gotten from, X and from Y and from Z. Is there any way that we can find a path forward here so that our student can attend? And of course, that's going to be a tough conversation with a reach school, but
Yeah,
that might be a very potent conversation with a safety school or potentially even a target school. If you're
Exactly.
if you're looking for information on all this, by the way, fantastic resource is collegeboard.org. Collegeboard.org has a ton of resources there, and you're able to then go in and see, as Adrian referenced earlier, the breakdown of the incoming class, most recent incoming class, as to what their GPA was by various tiers, quintiles, or quartiles, or what have you, as well as their, in addition to their test scores, also what their GPA was. And that'll give you at least a starting point for understanding, okay, how does my student match up with this? And there's more information there than just the the test scores and the GPA scores. But the nevertheless, that's a very good resource. Collegeboard.org.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Eric. It just really boils down to where we've been headed with this discussion so far. Just finding the right combination between what schools that you like and what funding and how you're going to go about funding those universities. And yes, it makes the conversation difficult where you are somebody, let's just say that you're in a situation where the person that's going to university is really hard stuck on a specific university. But if you're not in that case and they're open to different options, then look at what are the funding options, which ones are going to be the most expensive, which ones are going to be the least expensive, which ones can you get merit-based awards such as scholarships and grants, and which ones are you won't. So I guess finding the right combination is really important here, and seeing what would be the best match for you, not only the university that has your criteria and the career path you want to go to, but also the one that's most reasonable from a financing perspective is something that is worth having the conversation with.
yeah, I agree. I think it really is all about creating options for yourself, right? So you have this point. You're not stuck with just one school, and that's it.
Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say one more thing. Just we'd earlier spoken about the question of should my student go to college, or what's the outcome of that experience going to be? There's one more resource that I do want to tie in here, because these, although we're trying to treat these as conceptually separate subjects, the cost and should I attend, et cetera, they're of course very fully integrated in all of this. One of the other products of that group at Stanford University that's been looking at this connection between where you attend and what your outcomes are, they have another website. It's called challengesuccess.org. We'll put that in the show notes as well, challengesuccess.org. And there you can find even more sort of commentary and reflection on this question of what's the right approach, what's the right school for my student. Fellas, should we shift into talking about some of the costs and then how to pay for it?
Definitely, yes.
All right, so
Yes.
you guys have dropped some numbers already in this conversation. Harvey Mudd at nearly 80 grand. I talked about Villanova at somewhere in the neighborhood of mid
That was
70s.
Vanderbilt, correct?
Oh, did I say I meant Villanova? I'm sorry if I said
Okay,
Vanderbilt. I misspoke. So I'll have
okay.
to fix that. But yeah, so in the bottom line was that you're seeing a lot of these state schools that are considerably less, but prices have been increasing over time. So that's the sticker price. How do you go about reducing that sticker price? What's the approach? What's the first step that people should be taking? once they've kind of gotten their pool of possible schools that they want to include as part of their application process.
We'll
Be
see what
completing.
merit and scholarships you can get, grants. That will help lower the cost. And next level would be loans. And there's unsubsidized loans and subsidized loans. That's another area that people look into as well, private loans versus non-private. And
And
another option is work study programs. So those are the three that I've looked into as well that can reduce the overall price of
Eric,
attending
well,
university.
your question to me, the first step, I believe, would be completing the FAFSA form,
Right.
correct?
Yeah. So talk about the FAFSA form.
Well, you've got to complete that, and I was always told you've got to complete it as soon as possible. It includes um, assets and income for the parents, assets and income for the child. That will help you determine how much aid you're eligible for, which will then lead into, Adrian, exactly what you had said with the various loans, work study, and so on that's available to you. So what I've always been told, though, is the sooner you complete it, the bigger the pool of money that's available to you. And in addition to that, though, Adrian, as you had said, the scholarships as well that you can look into. I can't speak with any experience on this, but there was an app for scholarships that was on Shark Tank, and there was a it's called Scholly, Scholly, and as I said, I have not
Mm.
used it, so I can't personally say it's great or not, but I do remember the Shark Tank story where a student, and I just found the information on it. His name was Christopher Gray, got $1.3 million in scholarships,
Mm.
and through his hard work, and he basically took all of his work and he turned it into this app.
Oh, that's a
So it'll let
fantastic
you know what's
resource.
out there. Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's come back to that process of the FAFSA because the window opens on October 1st. And the FAFSA, it's the free application for student aid. The FAFSA, as you pointed out, is the main tool. And we're going to talk about another one in just a second. But the FAFSA, what it does is any school that offers federal aid to students as part of the mix of need-based aid, any school that does so is required to accept the FAFSA. And so as you go through and you fill that out, the outcome from your entering in all of those data is what's known as your expected family contribution, or your EFC. That's the number that all of the schools to which you're applying, which have access then to that FAFSA result, will use as their sort of initial starting point for understanding how big a gap there is between what their gross sticker price is and what you and your student should be assumed to be able to come up with from existing assets and income, including 529 plans. And then that the balance determines the quote unquote need. And then that need can be filled with either need based financial aid, merit based financial aid, or loans, or work study, as you pointed out earlier, Adrian. I would want to put an asterisk on that because sometimes the merit-based aid is they really want you and they feel like you're a great fit for their school. They'd love to attract you. That merit-based aid may exceed that measured need and put you into a position where your actual out-of-pocket costs, again, including from 529s, are lower than what your expected family contribution might be deemed by other schools on the basis of the FAFSA. There's a second form. The second form is the College Scholarship Services Profile. And now this tool is for it's not required for the federal aid, and as a result, it's far fewer schools actually use it. But why do we mention it? It is because a lot of the smaller private schools prefer this, and it reaches a different conclusion in many cases about what the expected family contribution would be. So you want to try to understand if it might come through with a lower number as your expected family contribution than the FAFSA would, and you know that school both accepts it and actually would want it. Well, then you should include that as part of your preparation process to develop that. But coming back to the point that you made a little earlier, Roshan, is that on the federal aid side, that aid is distributed pretty much on a first come first served basis. So if you are really tardy to the party of making that application and having that FAFSA prepared, you're disadvantaging yourself at least at this level in having some of the eligibility for some of the federal aid that might be available.
Yeah, that is very useful information. That uh, and actually, Eric, let's share the links and the website for that. For FAFSA, you go to studentaid.gov. What is the other site?
Mhm.
The private
That's the CSS profile so it's going to be the College Scholarship Services. Um, let's see, I think it's,
cssprofile.collegeboard.org. Yeah.
yes, thank you. So, how much aid then are students getting? We've talked about the price. Let's talk a little bit about how much is coming in. So you have some sort of, you as our listener has some sense of what actually this amounts to. What's interesting is that the grants actually have been growing over the last decade. That's an encouraging sign, and loans have been as a gross level across the entire country have been coming down. I think that's also an encouraging side because we've of course all heard the horror stories about people being saddled with enormous amounts of student debt, and so to see the shift and the mix increasingly moving to grants and less to loans is a positive thing. But in terms of the aggregate amount of all grants, all federal loans, all tax credits, and federal work study, how much is the average aid per full-time equivalent student in the year 2020 through 2021? Well, for undergraduates, it was just under $15,000. Remember, that's inclusive of loans, that's inclusive of federal work study and tax credits. For graduate students, if you're thinking in those terms, it's a little closer to $27,000 a year. So
Yeah.
that's not chump change, and that's an average, meaning that there are some students with well more than that. But when you again compare that to the sticker prices of some of these schools, you realize, wow, that still leaves a yawning gap
Huge.
that needs to be filled. So um, there are other thoughts about funding all of this. So we've talked about a variety of these, and we've mentioned merit-based aid, and I've explained that if you're thinking about doing that, uh, you want to try to say head for a school where your student's academic profile will be a match. There's also then, Adrian, you mentioned loans, and if you will, if you'd like, I can talk about a couple of those loans, actually three of those loans, or if you are prepared to talk about that, please go ahead.
Well, one I came across that I think was interesting that you can probably share more details are there are
Hmm.
loans that you can take out where the interest won't accrue while you're attending university. So I thought that
Hmm.
was really
Hmm.
important one to start out
Subsidized.
with.
Yeah.
Hmm. Those are subsidized loans, and so the interest is there, but the interest is being paid in this case by the federal government for doing while you're still in that deferment period, both while you're attending and then for a short period immediately after graduation. But there's also the option, and this is where oftentimes when parents are saying, "How am I going to cover the cost of this?" The ones that are a little bit more readily awarded are going to be the loans that the parents make, among them the unsubsidized or the unsubsidized version of those federal direct loans. Those were once upon a time more commonly known as Stafford loans. Now the nomenclature has shifted a little bit, and so more, as I understand it, federal direct loans. I looked this up about a month ago. The numbers maybe have changed a little bit, but here you might be saying, well, how much do those loans cost? Well, at the time, it was just a whisker under 5%, and you had to pay a little bit more than 1% as the loan origination fee. With and the limit on those loans was capped at $5,500 a year. So don't think you're going to be able to get the entire amount covered using those federal direct loans. Well, let me restate that: $5,500 a year for years 1 and 2, a little bit higher for subsequent years. Another version of these federal direct loans is the Parent Plus loans. Those are structured currently to take whatever is the current 10-year treasury rate and then add to that 4.6%. And then that's determined for the for the school year. So for the calendar year that we're in right now, coming up the coming school year, that would put that number at 7.54% is the rate, with an origination fee. And brace yourselves, this origination fee can run a good bit higher, up to 4.2% of the original loan that you're borrowing. But the cap on that is considerably higher, and you can go up to the full cost of attendance after all the other sources are subtracted. Finally, the last thing I'm going to say in terms of the loans is that there are private student loans, both fixed loans, variable rates, and those interest rates, as you might understand, are like all other private loans, going to be attached to your credit rating. So you can find information on that just Google private student loans, and you'll find a number of resources that will allow you to compare current rates on those. But there's at least, in addition to the subsidized loans that you mentioned, Adrian, those are three categories of loans that you might use to augment merit-based
Yeah,
aid.
and moving on past aid and just touching on other areas people look to save for school in general. And this will apply to everyone, but we started this conversation talking about someone later in life that's planning or didn't quite have enough saved.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and please, gentlemen, add to the
Mm-hmm.
list, but the one that comes to mind is the 529 plan. I would look into your state's plan
Absolutely.
itself, because you do get a deduction when you put money in, and every state's a little bit different. But I looked into a few years ago a client situation where they were paying for college, and the state of Virginia allowed them to put money in one calendar year and take it out the next, thus creating that tax deduction. So it wasn't necessarily for a gain; it was a little bit of a tax savings, because the advantage to the 529, when what it was really built for, was you put money in, you get a state tax deduction in most states, not in all, but in most, and when you withdraw them, so you don't pay taxes every year. When you withdraw it, it's tax free for college, for university, and actually after Trump's tax law, you can use it for private school even earlier, high school, and I believe grammar school as well. So that tends to be the
Mm-hmm.
uh, education specific plan that's out there. There are a couple others as well that people have used. They just don't have the same. They have a lot lower limit. There was what's called the Coverdale Education Account, and I'd have to look up what that max is right now. When I looked into it last, I think it was around 2,500. So it just and actually it looks like it's 2,000. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's never been raised. It's been 2000 for at least 2 decades, I
Yeah,
think.
and when you think about that, it does have similar treatment. The money goes in after tax, comes out tax free. But when you're looking at even a lower end like state school that's 23,000, or let's say 25,000 a year right now, not considering the more expensive, you know, mud college that we talked about, if you started that 2,000 a year, when your child is ready to go to school 18 years down the road, you've only got 36,000 excluding growth. So saying that college prices are going up similar to your growth rate, if you max that plan out, you're only getting, not even a year and a half roughly in there. So it's just simply not
Mm-hmm.
going to be enough. That's another education specific one. Um, a regular investment account that you can use is, and if you're trying to look at taxes as a comparison to the 529, the 529 is definitely better. It's tax free. The regular investment account, you could look at tax efficient strategies to make it more competitive, but in addition to that, it also gives you flexibility to use it for other things as needed. So in my example of, if my son goes to art school and I tell him, no, you go make art instead of studying it. Well, if I have all this money in a 529 plan and I take it out, I've got to pay taxes on the growth plus a penalty. Whereas if it's in a regular investment account, yes, I paid taxes along the way, but I don't have the penalty in that scenario. Good thing he doesn't listen. He
Great.
might be yelling at me for talking about him so much.
It's a great summary about those options. I just want to swing back to the 529 plan in particular. So, obviously, if you live in an income tax-free state, then you don't get that state income tax deduction. But using the state of Illinois as an example, where the flat income tax rate is essentially just a whisker shy of 5%. That means if you're saying, hey, we've got to pay some of this money out of pocket, and we didn't get on it earlier and get this process started. Hey, even if it's the same year, you can put the money in, and $10,000, I mean to say, from one parent, $10,000 from the other parent, can go into that 529 immediately at 5%. State income tax deduction on that basis means you just saved $1,000. So that $20,000 of available resources cost you only essentially $19,000. So even if you're thinking, oh, it's too late in the game to do that, no, it's not too late in the game. If you live in a state where the 529 plan will get you some sort of state income tax deduction, do it. I'll also just mention that you were talking about in the thinking about 529s, it's important also to be mindful of who owns those assets, whose name is on the 529. So the structure here is that parents in that FAFSA formula that we were talking about earlier that arrives at that expected family contribution, the parents' assets and income are weighted much less heavily than the student's assets and income. So as a result, but the beauty is that if, let's say, a parent has opened a 529, here's the way it's labeled. Let me use myself as an example. So if I open a 529 for one of my kids, of course, we've already covered the fact that my kids are gone up and out and gone and all done with that stage. But if they weren't, then it would be Erik's name is on this 529 plan, and my child's name is listed as the beneficiary. Now, you might say, coming back to the scenario that you gave, Roshan, well, what if that child had that experience encounter with you and decided, okay, I think I'm going to take you up on that advice. I am going to go to Paris and I am going to study there. Now you've got this whole kit that's built up in this 529 plan with that one child who'd been named as a beneficiary. Good news. You can change the beneficiary. You can change the beneficiary to another child, to another relative. You can use it for yourself, for that matter, if you go to an accredited school of some kind. You could even find potentially an accredited golf program, guys. And Adrian, I know you love golf, so you could find an accredited golf program and use that to pay the tuition for that program, making yourself the beneficiary. But here's what I want to encourage you to really refrain from doing. Don't open in the name of the child, because then it's deemed the child's asset. And also, I also want to say, be careful about having it be in the grandparent's name, because the FAFSA formula looks at assets that are held in a 529 with the grandparent's name on it as now there's a little bit more to what I'm explaining than it's not quite as simple as I'm explaining it. But by the time they're sort of midway through their college career, that asset comes into play, and then it's deemed to be the student's asset, and that therefore in that junior and senior year can really mess up the expected family contribution, just strictly in light of the fact that it now appears that the student, not the parent, has this asset. So what do you do to fix that if you, the grandparent, have that? By the way, in my wife's and my case, the 529 plans that we've opened for our grandchildren are in our names. You might be saying, Erik, didn't you just violate the principle you just expressed? The answer is no. There's a strategy that you can use to transfer ownership of that 529 from yourself to the parents, and to do that at just the right point in time so that it doesn't produce the effect that I was just describing. You might be saying, well, why do it in the first place? Why not just give that money to your kids and have it put in that money into their own kids' 529 plans? And it is because in our case, you'd think a financial planner would be thinking about this. We're in a situation where it's a greater tax benefit to us because we live in a state with an income tax, whereas our children live in a state with no income tax, and hence there's no tax benefit to be derived at the state level from so doing.
Yeah.
So just there are really some cool strategies that you can use with 529s. If you don't want to do the work of tracking what those strategies, tracking down what those strategies are, give us a shout. Our contact information is in the show notes at retirementlifestyleshow.com, and we'd love to have that conversation with you.
And Erik, I just want to put numbers to what you described with the assets and the child's name versus the parents. When you're calculating your EFC, expected family contribution, assets in the parent's name, 5.64 of those assets go to the calculation, whereas 20% of the child's assets. So what that means is if you've got 10,000 in the 529 plan in your parent's name, they'd expect 5.64 of that, or $564, to go towards college. Where even though it's a 529, it's a college plan. That's the calculation for aid. Whereas if it's in an account in the child's name, that same 10,000, that takes away 2,000 of your potential aid pool in the expected family contribution. And just since we're on the topic, the other two areas that impact uh, the EFC, or expected family contribution, are income, and it's 22 to 47% of the parent's income, or 50% of the student's income. That's important to note, particularly. I've seen business owners where they'll have their children work for them, and they will then pay them. Well, it's something where you really want to look at it when you get closer to college and applying for the applying or filling out the FAFSA, with the year before his income. That's when you want to make sure you really look at all this stuff closely from an income perspective, because they're not going all the way back. Whereas when it's an asset, you've typically started saving years and years before, and there's not much you can do about it when it comes time to apply.
Yeah, so boy, you're getting into some refinements here that I love. So one of them is how do you and by the way, before I leave it, just using the numbers that you gave a $10,000 529 plan. What if it's $100,000 529 plan?
Yeah,
Now the
and
EFC,
using that EFC, if it's and let's say it's an investment account, because it just makes it easier. And
uh-huh,
let's say your child's going to state school that's like 25,000 a year. If you've
hmm
got 120,000 or 125,000 in there in an investment account in their name, well, 20% of that's 25,000. The school costs
right?
25,000. Your expected family contribution just on the child's asset is 25, which means all options for aid are now gone.
That's exactly right.
I remember years ago, and this was a story that was specific to a private university, because private schools have a little more flexibility with their
hmm
aid. But years ago, I had heard a story about how it was a business owner that was able to work with the private university's financial aid office and say, and this was a sole proprietor, but they were able to say, you know what, yes, this is an asset in my name, but it's actually the business's asset.
hmm
And they were able to uh, work to create a what I'll call a customized EFC with that university. So that's another
hmm
thing worth noting, that yes, you complete this form, but once you're down to the specific school, you can talk to the financial aid office to see if there's anything else that can be done. And in that
hmm
private school conversation, this was about 20 years ago that I heard this, so I definitely won't remember the details. But it was something like their first year of school, they had to pay for all of it, and the second year of school they only had to pay for half, and the only difference was this conversation with financial aid.
hmm Yeah, so powerful to think about that. So here's since you mentioned assets that are outside of a 529 plan, and you're thinking, okay, well, how am I going to pay for this? I got to sell these assets, then I'll have the cash, and so forth and so on. You might want to think about a different approach, which would be have those assets that you gift to the child, have the child then sell them, and then have the child incur what would be potentially a lower capital gains tax to fund it. That's going to be in very specialized situations where the child is an adult and is no longer on your, no longer considered to be dependent, and hence the financial aid formula for them, let's say in graduate school, is not going to be a function of what your resources are as the parent. But that permits you, if you're thinking, yeah, but even though we're not formally in a dependency relationship here, we still want to help with this. Gifting appreciated assets to somebody who's in a 10 or 0, 10 or 12% marginal income tax bracket means they could take the capital gains at a 0% tax rate, whereas you, if you're in a higher bracket, would be paying 15% or more on those capital gains. So we've got, I want to be mindful of the time, but we have just so many other, approaches here that you can use that I'll just highlight. They are hiring your children at a certain stage, but not beyond. Having those children put assets into a retirement fund, which is treated differently than a regular checking or savings account or an investment account. Though these rules sometimes change, and I think they may have changed for 2022. Another option is when your student is at least age 21 or older. Then, if you are a business owner, you might hire them and then use that as deemed to be educational assistance to an employee, and then have a tax deduction there. So anyway, lots and lots of ways of thinking about how to approach the question of the funding. I'm going to mention one more. This is, you're saying, Eric, Roshan, Adrian, those are all great, but those, it's still not going to work for us. Well, here's an idea that it may or may not have appeal to some families, but this is what some of my friends have done in their students' cases, and that is, they, upon graduating from high school, they enter the National Guard for their state, and then they commit to a certain number of weekends of training and a certain amount of time during the summer for drilling and so forth. But with that, they have a full ride for their university education, and when they come out, they have, some continued expectation of a commitment there. But if your student aligns well with that kind of an approach, both to living life and as a citizen, it can be a really great way to cover the cost of attendance. On the other hand, if you're thinking, no, that's not an option, then one other option that we haven't mentioned is abbreviating the years that your student would be in school by having them enter what some high schools and colleges have worked out, which is sort of a pathway or a gateway program, which allows them to get dual credit in their senior year to get some college credits from their local community college that can then be transferred to whatever is eventually their college of ultimate choice. In addition, you can have AP classes if your student is well suited for that, and that also can cut out some of the credits required just simply by coming into the school experience with a number of credits under your belt. Just means there are fewer years that you have to cover that cost.
Yeah, anything that can save money in this
Mm-hmm.
expense, even using my uh, state number. I mean, that's still $100,000 if you're looking at
Mm-hmm.
4 years at about $25,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it's
Mm-hmm.
a it's a lot of money. And then when you go to the private schools, like that Harvey Mudd, that's almost $320,000 a year, and we haven't counted the appreciation on the cost. The fact that cost is going to continue to go up. So it's a lot of money, and anything you can save is definitely worth doing. Particularly with the conversation we had earlier of, well, what's being studied, and is this and I did the math on 4 years, but you had shared the number of the high percentage that are going for 5.5 years. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just it's a lot to think about and consider. There are a lot of strategies, and being planners, we probably are encouraging planning all the time, ad nauseum for some of you listening, but hopefully you can tell that we believe in it, and it works. It saves you money. It'll
Mm-hmm.
help you plan more effectively and more efficiently. So that's the last thing I'd want to add there. Adrian and Eric, anything you'd want to add on the topic today?
Yes, one thing, but Adrian?
Yes.
I mean, we brought up a lot of information, but I like kind of what you two brought up at the end, just structuring your assets in a way that's tax efficient, but also helps you get as much aid as possible is really important. It's not really a saving tactic, but more of a tactical one's really important. And there's just a lot to consider, a lot of options. There's a lot of flexibility out there. So the sooner you get started, the better. So that always works out well. So you can go ahead, Eric.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say that, again, what motivated this decision to cover this topic today was this is experience of actually working with clients and seeing the pain, the enduring pain and challenge that debt for student college debt, both for the student, but in this case particularly for the parents, what a burden that actually is. I would say, I'm going to go so far as to say I think this kind of debt is a curse in some ways, and so I just want to strongly urge you, if you can, to find other ways of approaching the college funding question or the riddle in ways that don't easily resort or sort of cavalierly resort to student debt, and then assuming that it's all going to work out. particularly for students who are saddled with a lot of that debt, it can do a lot of damage to their ability to actually launch and once they do finish school. So, just be mindful of that. And then again, just to recap what we said at the beginning, it may even be the case that your student isn't really their path for joy and rewards and success in life isn't to go to college in the first place, or if it is, perhaps it's to delay that. And even if they do go, whether early or after some delay, it may not be that elite school that's necessarily going to provide them this overwhelmingly better education. They may actually receive a better education and better preparation for what it is that they're intending to do with a school that doesn't necessarily, get ranked in the top 10 or 100 even in the country, but still offers a very powerful source of preparation for life.
Yeah, I completely agree. You hear the stories, and I think different parts of the country you hear different things as well. But I remember speaking to a colleague that worked in California years ago, and he was saying, well, no one there really starts settling down in their career till they're in their 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember for me, it was pretty much right after college you get into that career. Not saying one system's better than the other,
Mm-hmm.
just as you were pointing out, there are options and people's paths can be different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well done.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
so you want to wrap us up?
yeah, I was just going to say to everyone that's listened, that stayed with us for the full hour plus, thank you very much for joining us. Please like, subscribe, give us 5 stars, tell your friends and family. Reach out to us if you have questions. We're happy to help. But also, if you've got topic ideas, as you can tell, this is something that Erik just came across, and we're sharing that with you today. And please join us again next week. We'll have another great episode. This has been the Retirement Lifestyle Show.